Hi everybody, this is Nick and Peter, and this is our presentation on Trypanosoma cruzi. I hope you guys enjoy it.
I'm going to start off with the classification, origin, and history of Trypanosoma cruzi. Trypanosoma cruzi belongs to the phylum of parasitic glioids, and it is a flagellate protozoan agent of Central and South American trypanosomiasis. Trypanosoma cruzi is derived from a Greek word called trypano, which means bar, and soma, which means body. This is because this insect bore tissues in other organisms in a corkscrew-like motion. It feeds primarily on blood and also lymph, which causes the variation of disease based on the host organism. However, they also cause Duran and Sura disease in horses and Brucellus-like disease in cattle. Trypanosoma genus has many species of protozoans. However, only Trypanosoma cruzi, Trypanosoma brucei, and Trypanosoma brucei cause disease in humans. The World Health Organization estimated about 8 million people are affected with T. cruzi around the globe, with the majority being in Latin American countries, where about 20 to 30% of people infected end up with symptomatic and potentially life-threatening Shiga disease. T. cruzi has three morphological forms that alternate between infective and non-infective forms during their life cycle. And the forms are Trypomastogat, Epimastogat, and Epimastogat. Trypanosomes are about 20 mm long, having an irregular shaped membrane with a nucleus flagellum and a single mitochondrion. The figure shows the life cycle of T. cruzi and its various forms in invertebrate and invertebrate host, with brief description during the phases of their life cycle. T. cruzi membrane protein plays a vital role in its biological function, which includes interaction between the parasite and the host. Some key proteins in T. cruzi life cycle are TCGP63, TCASB, leucine, leucine-associated surface protein, translitase, and cruzi-tang.
So, a brief history about Chagas. It's believed that it happened approximately 7 to 10 million years ago through bats. Yes, bats, who migrated to South America. The first evidence that we have of it is from a 9,000-year-old Chinchorro mummy, and these people were believed to be the first settlers of South American coast. They did mitochondrial DNA sequence testing through PCR amplification. Then, around the 13th-16th centuries, we have the first recorded evidence of trypanosomiasis, which came from Peruvian ceramics. They showed symptoms like unilateral eye swelling. But it wasn't until 1909 that a Brazilian physician, Carlos Chagas, who was treating Berenice, a 2-year-old girl, that Chagas was named as a human disease. She presented with a fever and large spleen and liver and swollen lymph nodes, and he saw a lot of trypanosomes in her blood, which he compared to previously infected marmoset monkeys, which showed similar morphology. So what is it? Well, it's a zoonotic disease, which means it can be transmitted from animal to human. In this case, it's transmitted to animals and humans through an insect vector, specifically the triatomine or kissing bug, whose feces carry the parasite. It's also considered a neglected tropical disease by the World Health Organization, and they consider these diseases to be in low-income areas and regions with hot and humid climates. And it's also an inflammatory disease that occurs immediately after the bite. If you look at the right, you can see some of the bugs, and they look similar in morphology, but more or less they look the same. So I'm sure by now you're wondering, how do I get Chagas? Well, let me tell you. Most infections are transmitted through direct encounter with the infected bug, and these bugs are usually found in the crevices of walls and roofs of the home, and they come out at night to feed. So once the bug has found its host, it'll engorge itself on the blood of the host, and after it's done, it'll defecate on the puncture site, which allows the parasite to enter the host's bloodstream. Scratching will further aid this infection process. A few of the less common ways of transmission are congenital, blood transfusion from an infected donor, organ transplant from an infected donor, sometimes through breastfeeding if the mother's nipple has cracks in it and the blood is exposed to the child, through consumption of undercooked meat that's contaminated with the feces of the bug, and sometimes through accidental lab exposure. So, what happens when you've been bitten? Well, that's when pathogenesis begins, and its infectious success comes from the ability to evade the host immune system by inhibiting the effects of its phagocytic system. So, as the parasite invades the host organism in its trypomastogote form, it attaches to the plasma membrane of the host macrophages and creates a vacuole that later fuses with a lysosome, creating a phagolysosome, and that can be seen in picture 2, pointed with the black arrow. As the growth continues and the trymastogote ruptures through this phagolysosome, it enters the cell's cytoplasm, where it differentiates into a mastogote form, which undergoes binary fission and multiplies, and then transforms back to the trimastogote form. As these trimastogotes increase in number, they cause rupture of the actual cell and get released into the bloodstream, causing further infection. So let's talk signs and symptoms. This disease comes in two phases, acute and chronic. The acute phase can last anywhere between 2 weeks to a couple months, and you can see a lot of circulating parasites in a blood sample. You can have immunological inflammatory reactions, or you can have symptoms like swelling at the infection site, fever, rash, body aches, loss of appetite, headaches, nausea, diarrhea, and vomiting, or you may not even have any symptoms, which is why oftentimes Chagas is not diagnosed or treated. You can also have severe acute symptoms that can present with inflammation of the heart, GI tract, and nervous system. If the acute phase has not gone away or been treated, it can often lead into the chronic phase, which can last 10 to 20 years after the initial infection. Sometimes this phase can be asymptomatic, but in 20 to 30% of cases, it's been shown to have serious complications that can include cardiac symptoms like cardiomegaly, irregular heartbeat, congestive heart failure, and even cardiac death, or it can have GI complications because of swelling and can lead into difficulty swallowing or abdominal pain and constipation. So when do you know if you should see a doctor or not? Well, if you have symptoms like fever, fatigue, nausea, rash, and body aches, or swelling from a bug bite, but you've also been traveling to areas where you suspect Chagas is present, then you should make an appointment. And the doctor can examine you, they can do a blood test, and a blood smear will show parasites in the blood if you have an acute infection. But if they suspect a chronic infection, they can do an antibody test for anti-mastogote IgG antibodies to see if you've been infected. If you want to be Chagas free, prevention is key. Some of the ways of avoiding it is simply not sleeping in dirty houses. Simple as that. You can use insecticide-soaked bed netting, you can use anti-bug repellent, or you can hire a company to spray some insecticide around your house. So if you've been unlucky enough to get Chagas, you do have an option. You can take anti-trypanosomal therapy, and there are two medications currently available, nifurtimox and benznidazole, but sadly, neither of them are FDA approved, so you'll need doctor's permission to go into the test study for this medication. And benznidazole is the first line choice because it's better tolerated and more available. The second treatment is basically treatment for anti-trypanosomal therapy because of the side effects that it can cause, and also treatment for Chagas associated symptoms. Well, that's it for Chagas and Trypanosoma cruzi. I hope you guys enjoyed our presentation, and thank you for your time.